organisation that you're from?
So my name's Paul Howard. I'm the Director of Corporate Affairs at Greater Manchester Mental Health.
And can you tell us a little bit more about your expectations, your learning expectations for today, whether there were any skills that you wanted to build up, or perhaps some organisational challenges that you wanted a bit more clarity on?
So when I saw the agenda for today, and certainly the title for today, I kind of recognised that there was an area of work that I wasn't particularly focused on. So I think when we think about MPs and politics, it's almost an afterthought, isn't it? And we think, okay, we need to think about how we deal with stuff in a moment. And what today was going to give me the opportunity to do was to sit down and think about how we can be more proactive about that and how we can make that part of our planning and thinking rather than doing it in a reactive way.
And how confident were you sort of liaising with political figures? Is it something you have much experience doing sort of in previous roles?
No. So personally, very little experience of liaising with MPs and other politicians, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm here, because I'm aware that we do it as an organisation. I'm aware that NHS organisations generally do it, but actually in my new role, so I've been with Greater Manchester Mental Health for a few weeks, it's become part of my portfolio, and it's something that I just want to understand better.
Do you think that confidence has increased from the session so far?
So what I've really appreciated today is two things. The first is the ability to sit down with colleagues from different organisations to talk about how they do things, to talk about their experiences, because to have the opportunity to sit down with so many people in one room is just amazing, and to learn from people. But one of the things that I've really appreciated is to hear from former MPs about how they want to engage with us, the things that they can do for us, with us and through us that you just wouldn't even necessarily think about. And that ability to have the candid conversations, for them to be vulnerable with us and talk about their nervousnesses, and for us to do the same back is really helpful.
And was there anything within those discussions with MPs that you found particularly eye-opening at all?
I think sometimes it's easy for us to think of MPs as figures and to think of MPs in terms of their role, and it's really helpful to remember that they are human. It's really helpful to remember that they're people. But what's also really helpful, particularly for us as NHS leaders, it's helpful for us to remember that they don't just focus on health. They've also got other things to think about as well. So they will also be looking at their local education things, they'll be looking at the stuff that constituents bring to them. And so whereas we're focused on health, understandably, as our organisations, it's only part of what an MP does, it's not their entire portfolio of interest. And so just to remember that, and to have conversations around, okay, how do we make that easier for you to understand? How can we help you to understand a 150-page planning guidance document, for example? How can we help you to understand what that means for your constituents is really helpful.
You touch a little bit on communication in that answer. I'm just wondering, do you think after today you'll be able to go out there and build an effective relationship about politicians? And I wonder if you could maybe just briefly summarise some of the things that you think you've taken away from today that you would advise somebody else to kind of do to build an effective relationship with a politician.
So I'm coming away from today with a to-do list of things. I've already contacted people who work with me and for me to say, can we sit down and talk about how we do this? So part of the thing for me is about fully understanding as an organisation how we coordinate our approach to dealing with MPs and other politicians. And I think being able to articulate that is really important. One of the things that I'll be doing next week is sharing my learnings with my board and talking about the things that we'll take forwards as next steps. So I'm really interested in how we get together with our MPs on a regular basis. I've learned ways of doing that, so how to engage with their people in their offices, ways that they can help us to better understand how we develop that relationship. So I'll be taking that forwards with my organisation, with the team that works for me, but also giving that assurance to the board that we know that we've got that ability and this is the next steps that we're going to take.
So I think that kind of links in a little bit to my next question, which was going to be about sort of tangible actions that you might take forward. And I know you've just said I'm going to go out there and establish this within my trust setting. But once you've built that relationship, do you think there is anything that you're thinking from a perspective at Greater Manchester Mental Health is, yes, we need to sit down with our MP and kind of start a conversation about this?
One of the things that I think NHS organisations are doing really, really well is working at place level. So what we hear from particularly those that have got coterminous boundaries, local authorities and NHS organisations are working together really well. And what we find, I think, is that MPs almost get sidelined from that conversation because they're not at that local level. And so having the awareness of the role of an MP and that moment of, okay, let's stop at an early stage and think about how we involve our MPs is really key. But I also think one of the key learnings from today is that we shouldn't just be using MPs responsively. So we shouldn't just be thinking about how we brief an MP when things have gone wrong or how do we engage with an MP in terms of particular caseload. But it's in terms of how do we routinely develop that relationship so that when we need to have honest conversations, either way, whether they need to have an honest conversation with us or we need to have an honest conversation with them, there's a relationship that's already there and we're not trying to start that from scratch. So I think that's really key going forwards, is building those relationships. Now, someone like Greater Manchester Mental Health, an organisation such as ours, we have more than one MP to think about, which adds additional complexities. And there's colleagues from other organisations here today who've got a similar situation. But that just means we have to be more purposeful about how we do it, not that we shouldn't do it.
I think you might have answered most of this next question, but it's just to ask if you've got any additional input for it. You talked about talking to your colleagues about what you discussed today, some of the learning, some of the actions you're going to do. Is there anything in particular that you are going to want to share with your colleagues or your board in terms of the learning that you've kind of taken away from today?
So I think one of the things for me that I've taken in terms of tangible learning is how Westminster works. So we hear in the news about select committees and all-party parliamentary groups and other things like that. And I'll be honest, I've probably been quite guilty of just taking that at face value and not really stopping and thinking, what does that mean? But when you understand a little bit more about how that works, how MPs' offices work, how case management happens in an MP's office, it makes it easier to understand things from the MP's perspective, but also it helps us to identify how we can feed into that process earlier so that we can help deliver information to their constituents or help them to understand our position. And it also helps us to think about how MPs can help us in terms of the future direction of our travel.
My final question for you, Paul. How much has this session satisfied your need for kind of learning in political partnerships? Is there anything that you would say to the NHS North West Leadership Academy of, I want to explore this particular bit a bit more, or I'd like more of this kind of learning within the political space?
So I think for me, if I'm really honest, I've always been a little bit nervous around MPs because about the concept of them. Let me start that one again. So I think if I'm really honest, I've always been a little bit nervous around the thought of dealing with MPs because I feel like you're constantly on your guard, you're constantly having to be careful about how you are and how you conduct yourself. And I think what today has shown is that it is possible to build those relationships, to build that trust and to work together well. And so for me, the opportunity to come together with people from the NHS is brilliant, and please keep doing that as a Leadership Academy. Please keep providing those opportunities to share experiences, to share good practice. But I also think the ability to sit down with the people that we're thinking about, so in this case MPs, and to hear their perspective is really important too. As examples, there are things that we might want to look at as a Leadership Academy in the future. How do we work with councils of governors better? How do we work with ICBs at a regional level better? And I think the model that we've got from this event today can be rolled out for different topics, and it's been really useful.
I just want to give you a final space to say anything you feel like I've not asked you that you want to kind of contribute to some of the people that might be listening to this?
I think if people are watching this and listening to this and thinking, should I go, is it worth the day's investment? My answer would be absolutely. You will get as much as you put into this session. But don't just look at the topic and think that's for somebody else, because it really isn't. If you're a senior leader in the NHS, if you're at board level or sub-board level, having a good understanding of how to work with MPs and other politicians is really key, and it's only going to get more important as your career goes on.
Well, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.